Greetings, and thanks for joining us. I'm Michael Boriskin. I'm the Artistic and Executive Director of Copland House, and I am standing in Aaron Copland's studio in his longtime home, a National Historic Landmark, and for over 20 years, a creative center for American music located about an hour north of New York City. Like Copland himself, Copland House champions American composers, past and present. One of our flagship initiatives here is our annual Cultivate Emerging Composers Institute, an all-scholarship, intensive, creative workshop and mentoring program for gifted young professionals directed by Grammy-nominated composer-clarinetist Derek Bermel. And we're especially excited to be partnering this year with I Care If You Listen and the American Composers Forum to present the virtual premieres of all 6 pieces Copland House commissioned from its 2020 Cultivate Fellows, which formed the core of their work at Cultivate. Each of these virtual programs will focus on one of those pieces. Today's program features the marvelous and really kinetic work that Will Healy wrote for Cultivate called Machine Learning. But before we go to the complete performance by our wonderful Music from Copland House Ensemble, Will is going to say a few words about it. And then after the performance, please stay with us for a short conversation between Will and Derek. So enjoy, and Will, please take it away. It's all yours.
Hello, my name is Will Healy. I'm a composer and pianist based in Brooklyn, New York. I write a lot of classical music, but I'm also involved in other genres. I have a group called Shout House that I direct, which is a collective of hip hop and jazz and classical musicians. And I love to improvise as well as perform notated music. A little bit about the piece that I wrote for the Copland House Cultivate program. My piece is called Machine Learning, which was written back in July and August of this year. During that time, I think we were all feeling pretty surrounded by technology. It was as though our entire environment had been replaced with Zoom meetings and curated news feeds and a world that was shaped by computers and machines that were sort of making decisions about what we wanted to see and how we wanted to interact. So I decided to write a piece that reflected on that idea, which is called Machine Learning. And I take one small data point in my piece, which is a motive that goes like this. Enjoy my beautiful voice. Da, 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 which is right at the beginning of the piece. And I take that as my data point and then spin it into a lot of the other sections in the piece. So each one is based either on the rhythm in that motive or the notes in that motive. And it's combined with this texture, which I imagine is kind of computers and machines scanning us for what we would want to see and hear. So you can listen to the piece and think about those things, or you can just listen to it as a piece of music, however you want to experience it. And I hope you enjoy Machine Learning. Thank you to everybody at Copland House for making the program happen during these tough times, and to the players who practiced and performed this piece so well, particularly given the circumstances. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Derek Bermel, and I'm the director of the Cultivate program at the Copland House, and I'm here with Will Healy. And Will, thank you so much for this wonderful piece, this clarinet quartet. I don't know if we can call it that. Machine learning. Um, can you tell us a little bit about what's behind this piece? And I mean, I loved hearing the it has kind of an ebullient feel to it, but it's kind of funky. It's it's got some beautiful lyrical writing, melodic writing in it. Can you tell us a little bit about your thinking as you put this piece together?
Yeah, sure. So I wrote this piece back in July and June of the pandemic. And I would say it was sort of the depths of the coronavirus pandemic. So some of the ebullient and lyrical stuff I would say comes from my need to just sort of enjoy my writing and to you know express myself in music. And I did a lot of improvising at the piano, and kind of playing the music that I wanted to hear and be writing. So that's one aspect of the piece. I would say the other one, and where the title comes from, reflects on my experience in the pandemic, thinking a lot about technology and the way that our entire environment has become an interface through computers, and feeling like we don't have a ton of human interaction anymore unless it's through this kind of interface, which means that computers are sort of studying what we want, and curating our experience of the world. Um, so in my piece, I was sort of reflecting on that and trying to take like a small data point, one little musical motive, and spin it out into the rest of the piece, which is which is just kind of how I structured my thinking, to relate to the idea of machine learning.
How do you interact with machines? I mean, yeah, you're that's it's interesting that you're observing life and thinking about the way machines work. How do you, as a musician, as a composer, as a creative artist, interact with machines?
Yeah, I would say that I resist my interactions with machines, because I think when I started composing, I felt like the right way to write music was like on paper with a pencil, like with quiet around me, and not like ever listening to MIDI playback, or even like I tried to avoid improvising and recording myself because I felt like it just had to come from like the heavens and then just like arrive on the paper. So I would say I've kind of had this back and forth in my process. And these days, I would say that my interaction with machines and the way that I write, it's a little bit of both. Like I do still like try to write my ideas down on paper, but I do a lot more improvising and trying out ideas also, like in Sibelius, and listening, having computer feedback as well, and not trying to decide like what's the right way to do things or the wrong way to do things. It's just like we have all these options available and you might as well use them.
And your piece has a kind of ABA feel to it, right? So you got this fast kind of chugging, undulating material, and then it has a much more and then it zones out for a bit, and there's much more quiet. There's quietude, and then it comes back to this urgent feeling again, and but ends on a quiet note, surprisingly. So, how do you think about form as you're structuring a piece, as you're writing?
Yeah, so I have gotten really into these kind of like structure graph things. My teacher, John Curliano, is really into the idea of like mapping out a piece. And I think it's like inevitable when you study with John that that you end up thinking in this way, because he's really passionate about it. And it's a great way to kind of plan out your ideas and see the future as you're writing. It makes it a little bit less scary to me when you're writing a piece, to see where it's going. So I just sort of planned out a shape of the piece that I wanted before I knew what the music sounded like. And then I gave myself instructions along the way of the way that I wanted my small musical motive to develop. And then I sort of like messed around at the piano and improvised and filled everything in. So I knew that I wanted it to have these moments where it was like the world of technology or computers or music or whatever felt kind of overwhelming. And then other moments of solitude that were very much like introspective and very simple and stable. And a lot of my, in my like structure graphs, I wrote like stasis with like just, I want the rhythm idea to be like the only thing. And that's sort of the idea at the end of the piece. Versus other times when the rhythm is constantly developing and changing and like leading you on a journey. I think that's one of the things that excites me about classical music or chamber music is like the ability to like go on a trip as you're listening to a piece. So I feel like that was a big part of my goal in this piece, was to feel like you went somewhere, and not I try to not just make it like, oh, this is like a journey that I expected to go on because I heard the beginning and then I heard the next part and then it was going to go from there. Like I try to resist that. I want it to feel surprising along the way for me, like as a listener and as a composer, just to be like, you're going on a path and you not are always just like going on the path that you assume you're going to go on as you're listening and writing. So yeah, that was kind of part of my process in this piece.
Well, and there's the path that uh, you have as a composer, that journey that you make to discover something and to end up somewhere that might be different. And then there's the journey that we try to have during the week and cultivate, where you actually have to come face to face with the music, face the music, as the case were, and then you have to uh, then you're going on another journey of revision and making changes. So what was that like for you during that week?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I did during that week was trying to develop some of my structural things and my transitions and a few things in the piece where you know, I have this back and forth now where I debate like, do I want to follow my plan that I made before I even knew what the piece sounded like? Or do I want to just the music to flow and develop naturally? And so during my week in Cultivate, I think I spent less time thinking about what my plan had been and more just trying to think like, okay, what does it feel like the first time you listen to this piece? Like, do you have your bearings? Do you know how the sections relate? And does like that transition work for you? Ignoring the backstory of how I had planned out the piece. So the main changes I made were related to like transitions, and then some technical things. Once like humans are playing it, they tell you like how comfortable or how uncomfortable this moment is to play on my instrument. So just taking feedback from the players and also listening to their recordings and hearing what worked and how things melded well and what didn't. It was a really specific circumstance because the players were spaced out. It was hard for them to hear each other.
So to speak, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they're super spaced out. And they, but they had, much more distance among each other than they usually would because of the pandemic. So, I had to make some adjustments to make sure that certain downbeats would feel really solid. And I did think a little bit about that.
So you mentioned the pandemic and the process of rehearsing, which was very challenging during the pandemic and making these videos. And you were all so terrific during that process and adaptable. What have you been doing during this pandemic? I mean, what's next for you, and how's it been for you?
Yeah, I've been sort of splitting my time. I play piano and I've been doing some concerts from home. I've been doing a lot of arranging too. A big project at the beginning of the pandemic was that I wrote a an interactive children's show that was sort of part musical theater, part concert music, that was recorded remotely by a like small orchestra, like 40 people. And so that was a big project. And then I've been doing like remote videos with my group with Shout House. We've done a lot of arranging with solo artists. I'm doing a project with Ayanna Witter-Johnson, who's an amazing cellist and singer. I just did an arrangement of one of her pieces for a concert. So I've learned so many new skills during the pandemic that I didn't like how to use a mic and how to like audio editing and lining things up. All these things that are really useful I should have known before, but I didn't have to know. So I think after the pandemic, I'm going to be a little bit more self-sufficient as a result of the things I've had to do. Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's taking a limitation and making it into an opportunity, which
Yeah.
is, I guess, something Stravinsky always said that composers should do. So, Will, congratulations on your work. It was so great working with you, and I just want to tell the audience that next week we're going to feature Shuying Lee's work, Bloodlines. So please return for that to hear more from another composer from Cultivate 2020, the year that was.
It
Thanks,
exists.
Will.
Thanks, Derek.